Peace be upon you. You are on the Cherkasov Media channel, and we continue our work. Against the backdrop of international agendas and global changes in the world, questions about the level of consolidation of the Circassians and their political positions are increasingly being raised. In today's realities, such questions acquire a new subtext, and I do not consider it possible for myself to ignore them. But before sharing my vision of the present, the current situation obliges us to look back a little. Previously, these episodes were planned as a deep dive into the details. In the future, I suppose, we will return to this idea. And today, I will try to highlight the points that I consider important for further discussion. At the current stage, when discussing history, Circassians often talk about the Russo-Caucasian War. Content has also started to appear that attempts to link the history of the Circassians mainly to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Based on today's realities, both in the region as a whole and in the world at large, I consider it relevant to turn to the recent history of the Circassians, related to the collapse of one of the world's largest powers. Despite Soviet propaganda, which adhered to the slogan "national in form, socialist in content," and engaged in the destruction of historical memory and self-awareness, happy is the nation in the great family of the peoples of the Soviet Union. It can be seen that there were always groups among the Circassians who did not accept such an order. By the 1980s, they became more organized and began to work more actively on the restoration of cultural heritage. After the announcement of perestroika, they were even able to legally engage in public activities. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union faced such serious financial difficulties that they led to problems of control and management in the republics. In particular, the maintenance of a huge staff and the activities of security and law enforcement agencies. The processes of decentralization and the disintegration of the country begin.
Hello, this is Vesti on air. The USSR no longer exists.
In the context of a political crisis, society mobilizes and public institutions are formed, such as the Congress of the Adige people or the Congress of the Kabardian. These congresses became important participants in the political life of their regions, and decision-making on key issues effectively shifted into the hands of the local population. The numerous Circassian diaspora also showed interest in what was happening in their homeland. And in May 1991, the Circassians created a powerful tool for legal activities. The International Circassian Association, which unites not only all the divided Circassians in Russia, but also the Abkhazians and Abazins, and naturally representatives of the multi-million diaspora from around the world.
Today I must say kind words about the initiators of the creation of the ICA. This is Fademi, Irajabi, Ikhtan Talehe, Zaurin Aloev, Anatoly Kadzokov, Zilaktan Findiev. They were the ones who laid the ideological foundation of the association. The meeting in 1989 in the Netherlands prepared the first Congress of the ICA.
In December 1991, the dissolution of the country was formalized by the Belovezh Accords, which marked the end of the USSR and the creation of a new union of independent states.
I think our people still don't understand what they are losing of the country.
While in the case of the Baltic states, the question of returning to a union with Moscow was not considered, the path of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania was predetermined, the processes in the Caucasus turned out to be much more complex. Georgia, having restored its sovereignty, refuses to join the CIS. And President Zviad Gamsakhurdia begins to establish ties with the newly independent Chechen Republic led by Dzhokhar Dudayev. This ends with the overthrow of Gamsakhurdia. A civil war begins in Tbilisi, which also spreads to the territory of Abkhazia. And the Circassians get involved in the conflict on one of the sides. Shortly after, Chechnya also ignites.
Urgently appear for the signing of the document. And when I didn't do it, armies were moved against me.
Meanwhile, in Russia itself, an illusion is created that the country is on the path to democracy. The new President Yeltsin declared a parade of sovereignties, free media emerged in Russia, and the institutions of civil society began to form.
Take the share of power that you can handle yourself
Amidst these processes, many peoples and regions of Russia gained hope that they could secure their interests for a long time. In particular, in Adygea, they are striving for the status of a republic, and the state flag becomes the flag of historical Circassia, which was restored shortly before. And the Parliament of Kabardino-Balkaria makes a historic decision. It recognizes the genocide of the Circassian people.
From the perspective of political and legal assessment, the actions of Tsarism against the Circassian people can only be qualified as an act of genocide.
But as time has shown, these hopes were once again not fulfilled. The thinking parts. These illusions disappeared immediately after the start of the war in Chechnya, which was supported by the leaders of the North Caucasian republics through an appeal to the federal center.
Take as much sovereignty as you can, as possible. The word can indeed carries a very profound and deep meaning.
At the same time, the first president of the MCH, Yuri Kalmykov, in protest, not only resigns from his position as Minister of Justice and leaves the country's Security Council. He continues to argue in court that the order to deploy troops violates the constitution of Russia itself.
Thus we will come to dictatorship, we will come to autocracy, we will reach a point where one person will interpret the concept of security in terms of territorial integrity as they see fit.
The anti-war processes were accompanied by mass public rallies in Ingushetia, Kabardino-Balkaria, and Karachay-Cherkessia, where people came out demanding the immediate cessation of hostilities and the withdrawal of federal troops from Chechnya. On the eve of the 1996 elections, which led to Yeltsin's victory, a massive anti-war rally took place in Maykop. It involved 28 political parties and public organizations out of the 33 registered in the Republic of Adygea. We have an authentic document. This is the resolution of the rally, signed by the public and political figure Kazanokov, who was the initiator and one of the organizers of the rally. He read it out to the assembled crowd on behalf of the participating representatives of the organizations. From the podium, demands were made to immediately cease all military actions, withdraw troops beyond the borders of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, and promptly begin high-level negotiations. Additionally, in case these demands were ignored by the leadership of the Russian Federation, there was a call to the authorities of Adygea and other North Caucasian republics to suspend the actions of the federal treaty on their territories. Extremely harsh conditions for Russian soldiers. Amid the courageous resistance of the Chechen people, it is accompanied by mass protests even within Russia itself. The Committee of Soldiers' Mothers publishes data on the actual losses of Russian troops and holds rallies in Red Square. And the Nizhny Novgorod governor Boris Nemtsov collects over 1 million signatures demanding the immediate cessation of the war and personally delivers them to Yeltsin's administration.
He said, "Can you gather signatures in the country?" I said, seriously, how many are there? Can you tell me, please? I really need to know. 50? He thought hard.
All this forces the president of Russia to sit down at the negotiating table and sign the peace agreements of Khasavyurt. The war in Chechnya stopped for a short time.
They were drafting the text of the joint statement. Only its signing, which was done in the presence of the head of the OSCE assistance group in the Chechen Republic, Mr. Waldeman.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs decides on the need to intensify work on the international political stage. At that time, the main body for peoples and nations without recognized states was the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, UNPO, headquartered in The Hague, Netherlands. On February 11, 1991, an agreement was signed there, and representatives of movements from Estonia, Latvia, Armenia, Georgia, and Tatarstan, as well as Crimean Tatars, Tibet, Taiwan, Kurdistan, and several others became members of the organization. Representatives of Circassia became members in 1994. In 1997, at the UN Congress, a new representative of the MCHA won the elections against former US Senator John Nimrod and becomes a member of the organization's steering committee. Despite strong opposition from the agents of interested states, the UN still adopts a resolution recognizing the genocide of the Circassian people and grants them the status of an exiled people, as well as supports the Circassian representatives' participation in the United Nations Human Rights Commission session. This opens up for the Circassians not only the opportunity to use the genocide, the global platform, and for the first time voice the Circassian issue at official events at the UN. But equally important, it provides the opportunity to interact with representatives of states without intermediaries. From the report at the 54th session of the UN Commission on Human Rights, it becomes evident that the Circassian issue cannot be exclusively an internal Russian matter, at least due to the fact that the majority of the people live abroad. And, accordingly, the circle of stakeholders is significantly broader. As a result of the session, a decision was made to include the Circassian issue in the session's protocol and to continue work in the UN Working Group. A conquered people. The confirmation of the thesis that the Circassian issue cannot be confined within Russia was already found by international experts in 1998 with the resumption of active hostilities in Yugoslavia. On April 6, 1998, during the work of the UN Commission on Human Rights in Geneva, consultations were held on the issues of the Circassian people, where questions were raised about the problems of the relocation of Kosovo Circassians to Adygeia and the need for dialogue between the UN Commission on Human Rights and the leadership of Russia. The platform also allowed for interaction with a representative of the Albanians from Kosovo, resulting in an agreement to hold negotiations between the MCHA and the leader of the Kosovo Albanians, Ibrahim Ragov, to discuss the issue of Circassians living in the territory of Kosovo.
The issue of the Kosovo Circassians, who are at the epicenter of the Balkan conflict, has come to the forefront again.
At the MCHA Congress in Krasnodar, while discussing this issue, the representative of Prince Ali of Jordan offered his assistance and expressed readiness to provide a military transport plane to bring people back to their homeland. However, the president of Adygeia, Aslan Jarimov, who returned from Moscow that day, assured that during the meetings held the day before, he received confirmation that a decision had been made at the level of the Russian government to evacuate the Circassians from Kosovo.
There was supposed to be a resolution by the government of the Russian Federation by this Congress, but literally, well, such a resolution will be adopted in the coming days, in a word. It will be adopted now in the coming days. I just returned from Moscow yesterday, and all legal issues will be resolved. And very soon they are sitting on their suitcases, poor things. We will take measures to bring them back.
And on August 1st, the first group of Circassians from Kosovo returned to their homeland. On July 25th, 1998, the former assistant to the mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak, a career officer of the KGB of the USSR, Colonel Vladimir Putin, was appointed as the director of the FSB of Russia. And already on August 17th, Kiriyenko announces a default, paving the way for the security forces to the highest echelons of power.
I must fulfill the President's assignment and present. The appointed Director of the Federal Security Service, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. The decree is signed by Leonid Nikolaevich Subotin. The tasks that lie ahead are very serious. The only change that has been happening recently is probably that ensuring the country's economic security is becoming the most important issue.
And from this moment, Russia begins preparations for the second part of the special operation in the Caucasus.
A period sufficient for serious reflection on the path traveled over these years.